Hi, my name is Jenny Ray LaRue from Management Consulted, and I'm really excited to be with you today to share this webinar about consulting firms, specifically their interview style differences. We put together this webinar as input from a number of our black belt clients suggested that they really enjoyed the tailored approach that we take when we think about how they're preparing not just for one firm, but sometimes for many firms in tandem, and how they should stack rank that preparation and how they should tailor their preparation to the style differences of each of the individual firms. So here's what we're going to go through in the webinar today. First, we're going to talk about just some of the firm style differences in general, their overview of the firm ways that they operate, some of their core values, and then in addition, how that covers both their fit interview and their case interview high-level practices. Then we're going to do a deep dive on MBB firms to give you an explanation of some of the nuances of the different ways that firms interview. After that, we'll talk about the way that firms score. It also has an impact on your preparation if you understand how they are scoring you. And finally, we'll share tips for accelerated interview prep, which is a recommendation for how you take this information and then put it into practice for yourself. Overall, a lot to cover on the webinar today and a lot of really great material. Before we get started into all of the information, I just wanted to provide a little bit of background on myself and also on Management Consulted. I am a former Bain and Company consultant. I worked on 11 projects across 10 different industries at Bain, including projects through their private equity group and nonprofit clients. I had an amazing experience at Bain, but I personally did not want to be a lifelong consultant. I thought that I really wanted to start and build companies, and that's what I have now spent the rest of my career doing. I built one in energy technology and then another one in payment technology. And after retiring in my early 30s, I decided that it was time to build a family office, to invest in real estate and in companies. And I found Management Consulted and ended up buying the company a year later. I have really enjoyed working with our fabulous world-class team of people to build the community that we have today. And again, we're really excited to share with you the great experience that I had when I was at Bain, but also more importantly, this broader experience that comes from the collective wisdom of our coaches, as well as you, our more than 3 million members in our online community. We have at this point about 3.5 million members of our online community, and they go all over the world in consulting. When they go there, they give us feedback about the stuff that we did that was helpful to them, and also additional ways to nuance our information. And we send everyone to about 175 different consulting firms at the moment, as well as multiple corporate strategy internal practices and tech firms and other organizations that use case and fit interviews together to evaluate prospective employees. There are a number of firm style differences that I think will be helpful for you to understand when you're thinking about this. And we're not going to go into all of the detail around corporate strategy and tech. We're really going to focus on consulting when we talk about this, because it will help us stay focused on a lot of the key areas. Now, there are a number of key firm differences. The first are the top 3 firms, then the big 4 firms, and then finally the boutique firms. The top 3 firms, otherwise more colloquially known as MBB, is McKinsey and Company, Bain and Company, and BCG. They're in the company of one another because these firms are generally respected as peers in the industry. They generally sell against one another on many different projects. And in addition, they bill around the same amount and attract similar pools of talent. However, when we go into the deep dive in just a minute, you'll recognize that these firms are not by any means the same, and actually getting offers with more than one firm takes a lot of tailoring in your preparation process. The second type of firm is a Big Four firm. Think of those as Deloitte, Ernst & Young, PwC, or KPMG. These firms really built their consulting practices as an offshoot of their core businesses, which are audit and tax practices that are much larger. They are large international firms, and you'll hear me say large and broad a number of times as I'm referring to these firms, because your scope of work that you're doing there could be much larger and much broader than what you would do at a McKinsey, a BAIN, or a BCG. In addition, the practice area that you go into will be much more important than it would be at a McKinsey, BAIN, or BCG. In general, folks at Big Four firms are not training to be pure generalists. They're training to be focused on a specific industry or practice area. And finally, there are boutique firms. Boutique firms actually, if you had to pick which one they side with, the top three MBB firms or the Big Four firms, will be much more similar to the top three firms in the way that they hire and the way that they operate. However, the one similarity that they share with the Big Four firms is that they are generally more focused in terms of a practice area. So instead of being generalists, you might be general strategists, but in a specific space, such as financial services, in the case of Oliver Wyman, or in a practice area, such as supply chain and operations, in the situation where you would be working with A.T. Kearney. You'll notice that many of these firms really expect a different level of performance of you that in many ways I think is actually higher than top three and Big Four firms as well. Now let's get into a few of the key interview style differences that you'll expect to see. And here we'll walk through some of the case interview differences as well as some of the fit interview differences. And I recognize that all of this information is up on the screen at the same time, but I still want to walk through each piece of it one by one so that you can really understand what some of the differences are. In the case interview focus, for the top three MBB firms, the focus of what they're looking for from you, the interviewee, is speed to solution. They want to see that you are taking the most economical, direct pathway to get a solution. They're also looking for a clear hypothesis at the beginning of the case, and they're looking for an intense amount of data orientation, which means that you're not just interested in conceptual information, but actually how you're going to back up your hypotheses with data. For Big Four firms, in contrast, they're interested in clear structure, but a lot of their proving process is in the implementation piece. So they're not just interested in strategy and answers. They're interested in the operations and the practicality of your solution. They're also much more open to conversational data gathering. So instead of identifying the needs for every single data point up front, they're really open to that evolving through the conversation in the case interview. And then boutique firms value your depth of understanding. As I mentioned earlier, they really are focused on a key practice area or a key industry. And your depth of understanding of that industry, your ability to pull parallels between the firms that they work for and other firms in the industry, or to name a hypothetical client, will really matter when you're inside a case interview at one of the boutique firms. For the fit interview focus, this is a little bit different also amongst the different kinds of firms. For top three firms, they value executive presence. They call it the it factor. And what they're looking for is somebody who is cool and calm, not nervous, not stressed inside the interview, because they're going to put you into much higher stress situations when you're actually on the job, when you're working with CEOs, when you're being pressured by timelines and deadlines, and they're looking for your ability to be cool, calm, and collected under stress. The Big Four firms are looking for what we call the nice factor. In addition, they're looking for flexibility. They want to know that you have some focus in your future, but they're also interested in people who are open to changing in a whim. And the nice factor is really a nature of the Big Four firms. They're expecting you to be able to work really flexibly across multiple offices, practice areas, and clients. They're also expecting you in the flexibility piece to really satisfy their business needs. And as large organizations, they can't be as tailored to your needs as, for example, the MBB or the boutique firms could be. And then finally, for the fit interview focus, the boutique firms are really playing an underdog card here. They're concerned that they're they're a backup for you. And they're questioning whether you have a strong commitment to the role and a commitment to the firm when you're in the fit interview. So they will really look for detailed stories of ways that you've done your research and even answers that lean toward, I will take this job if you offer it to me. We're not going to go through much more of the fit interview today, but hopefully this overview gives you a good sense of how the firms operate and some of their core values. And we're going to do now a deep dive on MBB firms that really shows that even though the MBB firms are often grouped together, they're targeted together, they're idolized together, they're not by any means all the same. Now, what makes a McKinsey case a McKinsey case? Here are a couple of factors. First of all, there is a dedicated interviewer, which means that they have one case that they own, that they do not write. The case is written by a central bank of people. It's also very important to recognize that because they do not write it, they don't have contextual information outside of the case. The cases are usually 20 to 25 pages long, and the interviewer will walk into the room with a stack of paper that they will work through like a movie script. In addition, they score as they go. So while you're doing part one of the case, the structure, they'll be scoring you. While you're opening the case, they'll be scoring you. While you're going through the math, they'll be scoring you for each different question. Across the teams at McKinsey, for the interviewers, they're thinking how to ensure each case across the team covers a different business problem. So you can expect in a McKinsey interview that you will not get two business problems that are the same. So for example, you won't get two cost-focused profitability decline problems. You might get a market entry problem and a cost-focused profitability decline problem. So you can anticipate that you'll have to cover multiple different business problems in a McKinsey interview. In addition, math is calculated to the ones place because the interviews are pre-prepared and they're using a script and they're not doing the math in the way that they naturally would do it. They are using a script that they're expecting you to adhere to. So you need to have a higher degree of accuracy in the math. For firm one, for McKinsey, there are other firms that do have similar styles. These include Accenture, A.T. Kearney, and Strategy and just as a fun side note, A.T. Kearney actually has, I believe, the hardest interviews in the industry. They're the hardest ones that I have seen, and I would consider them to be even another level of difficulty beyond a standard McKinsey case. Some of the key tips are these that are generally interviewer-led, which means that while they are expecting you to have your own ideas, you need to maintain flexibility and openness and a listening ear to what a McKinsey interviewer is suggesting that you do next. You almost never will come against a McKinsey interviewer to hold your ground or recommend that you have an idea that they're not pushing you toward. They're expecting upfront a very comprehensive structure that represents a deep dive into the subject matter, but you will not specifically use that structure in that order with that data to solve the problem because their case will follow a very specific pattern. You can expect that the math will be hard. You will not spend a lot of time gathering data. You will spend time doing the math. So the math mechanics, you'll find more divisions by 7, more difficult percentages when you're going through a McKinsey case. So really brush up on those more tactical math issues. And then finally, you really need to push for non-obvious insights after the math. For McKinsey, they actually call them level 2 and even level 3 insights, where they're expecting not just what you see the data says, but also what you would recommend the company do, and also what the alternatives would be to what you would recommend the company do, and why specifically your recommendation makes sense in light of all of the options that could be on the table. What makes a case a BCG case? Well, BCG is very different from McKinsey. In first part, the interviewer created the case that they're giving you. So they usually will walk into the interview with a 1-page long brief, 2 exhibits that are adapted from a project that they did, if applicable. Those exhibits are usually very comprehensive. BCG is a much more natural conversational style case where they are scoring you at the end. They are very open to going on tangents, and they sometimes will even allow you to lead yourself astray. Whereas a McKinsey case will not enable you to do that because they don't have the context or the background to provide information for tangents. Out of all of the firms, you can expect the most complicated charts in a BCG case because they are the most similar to the charts that someone used on a project, which often will have 4 concepts baked into one. In addition, they're more open to rounding in the math because for BCG, you'll spend more time on data collection and less time on the integral steps of the math. They're interested in your speed to get to a insight, but not necessarily your speed to get to the answer. BCG similar firms include PwC, LEK, and Monitor Deloitte. And again, even those will have more nuances, which we won't go into today. But some key tips for succeeding at BCG are: number 1, prioritize data buckets. Quick metrics-based structures work really well for BCG because otherwise you will spend a lot of your time drilling down from a conceptual upfront framework to a data-driven internal framework and really hypothesizing upfront what you think the answer is and what data you'll need to support it can help get you to an answer of a BCG case much faster. In addition, BCG is really focused on highlighting the most important things inside the case. They are not as interested in making sure that you come up with a deep answer. They're making sure that you stay focused on the answer that you're trying to get by incorporating just the most important data. For example, if you're looking at a market entry case, you might want to look at the overall market for BCG, but you also might want to dive straight into a profitability calculation of whether an ongoing product could be focused in the market. And if you can't get there, you're never going to answer the problem. So some people spend much too much time in the BCG case focusing on their upfront issues and fewer focusing on the most important things. Finally, it's really important in BCG to drive to the data. They will allow you to tangent. They will allow you to spend your time on concepts. They aren't going to provide the data for you in a spoon-fed way. If you drive to the data, that's the way that you impress someone at BCG. What they're looking for at BCG overall is someone who is creative and focused at the same time, which is a hard combination to come by. So if you're able to demonstrate that you can think in the big picture, but then narrow down the actions to the small picture, you'll succeed at BCG. Now, what makes a BAIN case a BAIN case? Obviously, I always enjoy talking about BAIN because I had such a good experience when I was there. BAIN cases are generally interviewee-led. The interviewer will show up with a 20-slide deck, but they don't give it to you. They come with it and they wait for you to activate questions inside the interviewer. The interviewer worked on the business problem, but usually they had group support, centralized support at BAIN in creating the case. The deck at BAIN includes up to about 6 different graphics. So you'll have the 20-slide deck that has a number of the different pieces in it, but you'll also have more than in a BCG case, multiple graphics. The graphics are usually simpler than BCG graphics are, however. So they don't involve multiple concepts. They're going to be single concept graphs. In general, BAIN really expects that you do not hedge. They value a quick jab at the insight and definitive answers. They value a hypothesis-driven approach and a strong take. So if you say, well, it still could be 6 different things at the end of a BAIN case, it's very difficult to get hired there. Also, out of all of the firms, they value speed above all else. Speed, focus, drive to the insight. This idea of being, quote, BAIN's true north person is that you can identify where the value is and go there right away. They're not interested in a laborious McKinsey process or even this long data gathering that you go through at BCG. They want answers and they want them fast. For BAIN, there are firms with similar styles that include Parthenon and Oliver Wyman. In general, the key tips here are that these are interviewee-led cases, so you need to be ready to drive and also to provide very strong insight behind your answers, so reasoning as well as an answer. You need to build direct and practical structures. BAIN cares a lot about whether you're going to get to the answer in a practical way. In addition, they're looking to help you integrate pieces such as market research and surveys. So they're looking for the tactical things that they would do to gather data and for you to draw insights from ideas like that. And then BAIN really prioritizes linearity. You go from A to B to C, answer. So you don't look around for a number of different areas. You look at one thing, you look at the second thing, you look at the third thing. That's their version of being MECE inside the case interview. Firm scoring differences. So I'm just going to go over this at a very high level, but there's data that's let me just go back there. There's data that's collected behind the curtain inside these firms. And the way that they collect data also tells you something about what's happening. So I mentioned earlier that the McKinsey firms are scoring each question, and the overall scoring chart is an integration of their scores from each of the questions. We are not allowed to publish on here the McKinsey scoring scale, which is slightly different than this, but overall, this is a very, very similar scale to what McKinsey uses, and also a very similar style of how they score. So you'll see granular detail as well as some overall insights. And for McKinsey, what they're looking for is a very data-driven way to track your performance. In addition, if you are successful with McKinsey, you often get good, very detailed feedback, which is appropriate to ask for, because at the end of the interview, they've captured a lot of data and information about you as you've gone throughout the whole case. In addition, each question at McKinsey is guided for the interviewer to respond with specific numbering. So they provide very clear guidance about what a good answer is to the interviewer. So you'll have, again, good feedback about where you performed well or didn't perform well. You can expect to get the best qualitative and even almost quantitative feedback from McKinsey if you're moving on. They're a little bit reluctant to disclose that if you're not moving on. For BAIN and BCG, as I mentioned earlier, they score at the end of the cases. And scoring at the end of the cases means that they use this abbreviated scoring key. It's more of an overall picture for you. So your performance consistently throughout the case, not just opening well, really does matter. Maintaining a strong flow, strong opinion, and strong definition around data throughout the cases for both will really end up mattering. What this does mean is that you don't often get good quality feedback in between rounds for BAIN and BCG. So if they say you did well, what that means is you scored better than your peers, and I don't really remember the particulars of what you did. And so sometimes that can be a disadvantage when you're trying to gather more information moving into final rounds. But that's something you can always work with somebody at Management Consulted to try to get insights on. Again, that's something that we help people with every season. So now to wrap up, some tips for accelerated interview prep. How do you actually put all of this together in a meaningful way? First of all, there are a couple of do's and don'ts. We recommend that you do practice cases out loud and that you practice cases of each of the three types that we mentioned, because in general, they cover multiple different firms, not just McKinsey, BAIN, and BCG. We recommend that when you're doing that, you break down across the cases key areas that you battle with and even key areas within nuanced cases. So for example, if you battle at the beginning of a BCG case to define the data, that's something that you're going to want to work on. If you battle across all of the cases with math, you'll want to work on that across the board. In addition, we really highly recommend that you work with experts who will give you higher quality and more direct and more actionable feedback that's drawn from what they've seen work, not just with one person who's blindly going through the process now, but with multiple people over many years. Do not, however, read cases. They provide almost no insights for you specifically, and our approach at Management Consulted is very much a tailored, personalized approach. So reading cases will not help. Do not narrow your firm focus too early. Even if you know that you're going into a McKinsey case, we actually have found that people that prep for multiple styles of cases are better at McKinsey overall, and those who only do McKinsey style cases find themselves with blind spots. In addition, do not do too many cases. Our findings are that the best candidates, the ones that are the most successful, actually do between 20 and 30 cases. And on average, it's around 30. So if you find yourself doing more than 40 cases, you're probably repeating bad habits and not solving earlier problems. Now, our Black Belt program at Management Consulted is really a total solution that's a tailored process for you, that still has a lot of structure. You include in this 8 one-on-one sessions with an ex-MBB coach. When we go through our process of selecting our coaches, we have them interview with our current candidates who have worked with other excellent coaches, and they have to meet or exceed the bar of our current coaches. So we don't have a downward trend in our pool of coaches. We actually have an upward trend that is constantly improving. You also have 6 webinar recordings that are live that go much deeper into key areas of the case. They provide extra learning opportunities. These are discounted for partner school MBAs and for other partner school programs. If you're a part of a partner school, you should absolutely ask. And if not, then we would love to work with your school directly. This is, however, something that partner schools don't provide for students. So it's something that you will have to pay for on your own. And then finally, we provide access to peers for case practice, which again, these are higher quality peers that have common training and common language. So it just improves the overall experience. Here's an 8-hour MC coaching plan. And this, I think, really highlights the difference of how we coach versus anyone else in the universe. First, we really recommend that you work with a singular coach throughout your process in a defined way. First, a diagnostic session, then key deep dive targeted sessions on the areas you discovered were issues in your diagnostic session, and then finally refinement. After your diagnostic session, you're going to work on the targeted sessions simultaneously to doing peer practice, but most of your peer practice is going to come in the refining stage. And having this really clear definition with a plan for you helps you succeed more as you're going through the process. Now, our accelerated prep involves 8 expert coaching sessions where you build on each of the sessions. Tasered feedback. We stop you in the middle of the section and say, no, don't do that. This is not what they're looking for. You just did something that you did last time. It's an accelerated program, and we really focus on the quality of the preparation over the quantity of casing. In contrast, what we've heard from people who have come to us who have also tried other services, which, by the way, we have a lot, and we have no one that we know of who goes the other direction. So that also should tell you something. But they don't get internalization of feedback. It's not an accelerated process. They feel like they're just rolling around the same issues. And the focus is really on the quantity of time spent preparing, not on targeted improvements. Black Belt really works. We have a massive piece of data that shows that we have a huge increase over the industry average in success. Over 55% of our clients land top 10 offers, and many of them land multiple offers. Although we often will get messages from people that say, like the ones that we got last week, that said, I just got my offer from McKinsey. I didn't want anyone else, so I canceled BAIN. I got my final round at BCG, and that's who I wanted, so I canceled McKinsey. It's amazing to see what happens. Also, it involves this mentor and class model, and of course, world-class coaching and prep. So in summary, breaking into consulting is hard. However, our very tailored process, especially Black Belt, is incredibly unique. And the results really speak for themselves. Our expert coaches, in addition, like I mentioned, are handpicked by you and people that are in your shoes. And fundamentally, at the base of everything, we work as a team to help you succeed. We're really excited to be here for you as a resource at Management Consulted more broadly. You can send us an email if you have any specific questions, and we would really love to help you identify a prep plan that will work for you so that you can identify nuances between firms and ultimately get an amazing job at a consulting, a tech, or an internal strategy firm. Good luck in the process.